Hello, and welcome to the newest episode of the New Year Six podcast. Today I will be continuing my conference previews for 2023. Making our way through the group of five. I'm now down to the Mountain West, so we're definitely in the home stretch here, just Mountain West, Sun Belt, and I'll do something for the Independents in a few weeks. But we're getting closer and closer. August is a couple of days away, and then football will be right there. But so for Mountain West, same format as every other video up to this point. Just going to break down the conference, bottom of the conference, work my way up to the top, and then, pick a breakout player on both offense and defense for every single team in the conference I think is due for a big year. Looking at Mountain West as a whole, they have scrapped divisions. Last year it was two divisions of six. The two division winners play in a conference championship. This year they are, no divisions, free for all, and it's going to lead to, some fun times out there. So, kicking us off in last place in Mountain West, a team that struggled last year is going to struggle this year. It's going to be a hard rebuild, and this is not going to be the year that they start to see that progress. Maybe down the line, but nothing anytime soon, and that is going to be Nevada. Struggled in year one under Ken Wilson. I know they lost a lot through the transfer portal before he arrived, but they're in a situation now where rebuilding any group of five program is incredibly challenging, just due to lack of resources, lack of financial lack of financials there. Anything like that makes that rebuild harder than, say, a Power 5 conference where you got donors backing you got money from admin, everything like that, the fan base, the merch, everything. Nevada's in a bit of a tough rebuild right now. I think it's going to continue into 2023. I don't know how much longer it's going to go on past 2023, but it's going to be rough before it gets any better. Looking at the offense real quick. And the offense and the defense, at least in my eyes, are pretty identical, where there's not one group out there that, I look at it and think like, oh, that's an amazing group of athletes. That's the group that's going to take the conference by storm. Ultimately, every group on both offense and defense here, I think, ends up being bottom five in the conference, any way you look at it. I think Brendan Lewis is a, slightly below average quarterback in the conference. I think he ends up he ends up being kind of good enough, lower than average, but not not substantially worse than the rest of his competition out there. The receiver room is questionable for me in the sense that I think outside of Dallavon Campbell, I don't know who your next guy up is, and there's not, even though this is a room with a lot of seniors in it, I don't know who your star is. I don't know who your number one guy is that's gonna, help pin those things down and get things moving along. The running back room is kind of the same thing. Just a lot of question marks. A lot of, will they, play up to pace? Will they be the reason Nevada wins some games that maybe they shouldn't be winning? And I think my breakout player on offense for Nevada will come on that side of the ball. It's going to be Sean Dollars at running back. Comes down from Oregon. Didn't break through the depth chart there. Looking for a fresh start at Nevada. Only touchdown from last year was against Stanford, which I know Stanford was rough last year, but that's still a Power 5 team. For how much longer, who knows, with everything going on with the Pac-12 right now. But, showed pieces of what he could be, just not breaking through that starting lineup right now. Going to get a chance to start in Nevada, going to get a chance to live up to that, potential down there, and, potentially be a feature back. Looking at, the offense that Ken Wilson runs, they can mix it up. They can lead, it can be pass heavy, it can be run heavy. They're going to do what fits their personnel. So if Dollars lives up to that potential, he's going to have, he's going to be the feature point of this offense. I think it's too early to tell. I think he just doesn't have the experience for me to mark him as a marquee back. But I think after this season, we'll start to see what he what he becomes, what he lives up to, and then get him ready for 2024. Looking at the defense, it's a very similar story. I think that the D line is slightly below average. I think again outside of Deion Washington, I don't know who your next playmaker up is after that. The linebacker room, kind of the same deal. I do like Drew Watts as a linebacker back there, but again, it's a very it's a very shallow group in the sense that there's a few kind of key players here and there, but then you look around the rest of the position group and your eyebrows raise a little bit. Same with the DB room. I like Jaden Dedman at corner. I think he ends up probably being one of the better cornerbacks in the conference. But outside of him, you can make an argument for Isaiah. Let me see if I can get through this in one shot. Esasima, and then Emily Johnson. But really, outside of them, it is a position group that hasn't really proven themselves, and it's a lot of seniors on that defense as well, which is concerning long term for Nevada. But the player I'm going to take as my breakout player will be in that secondary. Going to be one of those seniors, and this it's going to be one of their safeties. It'll be Zeke Robbins. So just looking at last year, did get some action in the pass defense. Had a couple of passes defended, one against Texas State and one against San Jose State. So the type of teams that Nevada will consistently play over the year. Texas State, another group of 5 school down in Sun Belt, San Jose State in conference. So the type of teams that you want to have good performances against. Had 2 3-tackle performances, one against Air Force and one against Fresno State. So 2 of the better teams in this conference, over recent memory. But I look at those little nuggets of what he's done, those smaller pieces, those smaller sample sizes, and I look to what he could do if he's in a full-time starting position, which I believe that's going to be the case heading into this fall. So if Robbins is starting, which looks like it's going to be the case, I look for him to replicate those big performances against a few teams sporadically and have that more consistently, to where this DB room evolves from one of the more questionable, one of the more below average ones in the conference to maybe average, maybe more. It's all going to depend on how guys like Robbins play. So I'm going to look at Robbins on defense. I'm going to look at Dollars on offense as your breakout players for a Nevada team that is going to struggle in year 2 of Wilson's rebuild of the program here. All right, so moving on to 11th place, another team in a rebuild. And again, just for sake of argument, I think these next, so Nevada, this team and the team after them, I think are pretty interchangeable. If you want to have this next team in last, Nevada in 11th, I wouldn't really bat an eye at it. But yeah, I mean, just teams that are going to struggle for the most part this year. It's a very bottom-heavy conference in Mountain West this year. There's going to be quite a few teams that just end up disappointing, I think, any way you slice it here. But Nevada in 12th, and then another team in a rebuild that struggled last year is going to struggle this year. Maybe a little bit more upside long-term. Let's see how it comes together. But for right now, they're still going to have to figure things out. They're going to have to feel it out, and that's going to be Colorado State. So Jay Norvell is there. Again, struggled last year. Comes down from Nevada, I believe, and brought a few players with him. Really loaded this team up through the transfer portal, and it takes time. This isn't gonna. It's not an overnight process, but I think with the potential that this program has, the potential to build into a pretty steady group of 5 program, Norvell probably is the guy to make that happen. It's not going to happen this year, but if we're looking down the line, it could be something of interest to these fan bases. Looking at the offense real quick, I mean, again, I think the offense and the defense in this case, a couple of these position groups are actually really good. I think they have the best receiver group in the Mountain West, and it's already led by Torrey Horton, who 1,000-yard guy in the past. Definitely a guy that you can rely on. I think Kobe Johnson is a top 5 running back in the conference. So the reality is they're very top heavy at receiver, which, for the sake of this year, you need that superstar. Kobe Johnson almost hit 1,000 yards last year. I'm sure he's looking to eclipse that this year. So I'm not worried about how that comes together. And it's an air raid offense. The receivers are obviously going to have a field day. So if the receiver room is tight, the running back room is tight, that means your breakout player has to be quarterback in this case, because I don't evaluate O-line this year. But the player I think is going to have a big year is going to be Clay Millen, quarterback for Colorado State this year. I look at these, again, like these little pieces of a performance that he put on last year. A 3-touchdown game against Middle Tennessee. So, again, Middle Tennessee is, generally speaking, a very reasonable Group of 5 program. Definitely a school that hovers around that 500, sometimes dips above, sometimes dips down. But, 3-touchdown performance is nothing to laugh at. 261 yards against San Jose State is, again, that's a good day through the air. It's a quarterback-friendly system. It's something that I think, Millen is going to be your guy for the next couple of years out there in Fort Collins. And this is the year that he steps up and establishes himself potentially as one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. Because if he's locked and loaded and these other position groups are locked and loaded, this rebuild may be a lot quicker than people think. So I'm looking at Millen at quarterback to be the guy for Colorado State to have a big year on offense. On the defense, kind of the same deal. I think it's the best secondary in the conference. I think Jack Howell is legit. I think he ends up, he's one of the best safeties in the conference. He's got Henry Blackburn back there with him, another elite athlete. Aiden Hector at the nickelback, Chigozie Anusium at corner. Talented players up and down this roster. And it's a 4-2-5, so it's a little bit more DB friendly. But, the reality is that, if people are going to throw on them, I think they're going to have a tough time beating Colorado State that way. Same with the D-line. I think Muhammad Kamara and Grady Kelly, in their own right, are a very talented duo up front. I think this is a top 5, top 3, D-line in the conference. So that leaves the linebacker room, and I think it's a stark contrast where it's the least experienced, it's the least proven, and the one with the most question marks in my eyes. And that's where, I think your breakout player is going to have to come from naturally. It's going to be someone that came in, this summer, transfer student, ready to make a name for himself, and that's Tremaine Mieha Pastor. Tremaine Mieha Pastor comes in from Cal, and I know, Cal's doing their own thing, mixing it up. I get, couldn't cut through the depth chart, couldn't, establish that playing time. Looking to make a name for himself at Colorado State. And, I think he's going to be tested from the jump. If people know it's going to be hard to run on him and it's going to be hard to pass on him, you got to play with what the defense gives you. And right now the linebackers haven't shown us a whole lot so far. So I'm going to look at someone who had Power 5 potential and Power 5 offers to live up to that Power 5 potential. It may not be in Berkeley. It may be, again, in Fort Collins. But it'll come together for him. I think the defense is going to be pretty legit. And, if the linebacker room can get it together, if they can, again, play up the run, play back and pass, whatever that defense needs from them. And as a grad student, and, clearly a smart guy if he's at Berkeley, but, if he can be that leader and that voice for this defense, it's going to go a long way for Colorado State. At least in terms of leaving an impact and creating a legacy for those who come after him. So I look at Mieha Pastor on defense and Millen on offense as your defensive and offensive breakout players for a Colorado State team that is not there yet, but we'll see what happens after this year and if the pieces start coming together. All right, so moving on. So Nevada 12th, Colorado State 11th. In 10th, another team that struggled last year, another team in a rebuild. This rebuild is if we're really looking at it, this is probably the hardest job in all of college football. And it's not due to the pressure, it's not due to the expectations, it's not due to the boosters or anything along those lines. It's just the geographic disadvantage, and you should know who it is by now. But if you don't, I'm going to spoil it. 10th place, I got Hawaii. Very tough job. Timmy Chang back there as head coach in year 2. I mean, again, like they're if we look at what they had to face last year, their stadium is, I believe it's partially condemned, and they're building a new one. And again, like it's hard to get kids from the mainland to Hawaii to play. You got to really rely on local talent and then Polynesian talent. But I think we know the 5 stars are predominantly in California, Texas, Florida, etc. And it's hard to bring them out there. So I commend Chang for coming back to his alma mater and trying to make this work. It is a tough road ahead for everyone involved. But maybe this year they can show some potential. They can show what the future may look like, and kind of make that happen. Looking at the offense real quick, fortunately they do have a quarterback that can make this work. I like Braden Shager. I do think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the conference, probably top 5. So I mean upper middle, probably somewhere in that range. I think you got a solid running back in Tylan Hines. True sophomore, established himself a little bit last year, looking to continue to develop upon that this year. But the receiver room is the one I've got the most questions about. It's probably lower middle in this conference. I don't think the offense is going to be that bad. It's going to be pretty pedestrian. We'll get into the defense in a little bit, but fortunately you do have a tight end that can make those red zone plays. Tamatoa Mokiao Atimalala. Or no, excuse me, not a tight end. They run a 4 receiver offense, that run and shoot. So definitely someone that can be used as an option for Shager at quarterback. But again, outside of him, I have a hard time seeing who your next guy up is. And naming one guy that has made a limited name for himself as is not necessarily the most it's not the most welcoming thing looking into this upcoming year. So with that in mind, I do have to take a receiver. And again, I'm taking these transfers that come into Mountain West. That's going to be Stephen McBride. So comes in from Kansas, played a couple games last year. Again, didn't really find his footing in the depth chart, didn't find his his opportunity to play. Comes in as a senior, ready to go out with a bang. Spends his last year in Hawaii playing the game he loves. Kind of a nice way to go out, but sure, he wants to make an impact. Sure, he wants to help raise the profile of Hawaii football. And with that in mind, I think that it's an offense that's favorable to this receiver room. It's one that I think works in a way where someone like McBride, who came in from a pass-heavy offense as well at Kansas, now he comes into Hawaii where, again, the talent of Mountain West is not the same as the talent of the Big 12. So I think using that to his advantage and seeing the types of players that he has week in and week out and applying it to Mountain West is going to be a huge upgrade for Hawaii at receivers. So I look at McBride. I look at him as potentially the guy that Hawaii needs at receiver, and someone that could be due for a big year if this all comes together. Looking at the defense real quick, a couple of these groups are pretty good. So if Hawaii is going to win games, I think it's going to be due to defensive pressure. They have a good DB room, top 5 in the conference in my eyes. Guys like Peter Manuma, safety, established himself last year. His other safety out there, Meki Pei. You got corners out there. Verdell Edwards. Who else? Cam Stone. So it's a pretty established group of players in the secondary. Linebacker room very similar, really led by Logan Thomas, who ends up probably as one of the better linebackers in the conference. The D-line is the one I have the most questions about because outside of Jonah Kahawai Welch, there's really no one there that's made an impact so far. So one of those guys is going to have to step up. One of those guys is going to have to make an impact. and the player I'm going to pick to do that is Daniel Williams. So again, it's a 4-2-5 defense. He's going to be lined up in the middle. He's a JUCO transfer coming in after a couple years and ready to play at the FBS level. As I say in every single one of my videos, I don't watch JUCO football. You don't watch JUCO football. Only really the coaches do. So it's very hard to evaluate a player like Williams without seeing tape. With that in mind, I don't think that Chang would put him out there as a starting player on this D-line if he didn't believe in him, if he didn't think he was ready for that spotlight and ready to make something happen. So I think Williams has a big year by virtue of necessity. Someone on this D-line needs to step up. I think he's in Hawaii for a reason. He's here to make a name for himself, and he's gonna do it this year. So I look at Williams on defense, McBride on offense as your breakout players for a Hawaii team that again will continue to struggle this year, and then we'll see if we can put it together in the future. But very tough job that they've got out there, and we'll see how it goes. But all right, moving on. So to recap, Nevada in 12th, Colorado State in 11th, Hawaii in 10th. So 9th, and I think 9th and 8th are pretty interchangeable for me. They're kind of in that same general vibe in a sense. So moving on to 9th here, a team that I would say had a pretty good year that last year. Not to maybe the program standards long term, but definitely a solid year from this team last year. I think they take a step back this year in a fairly substantial way, and this is going to be Utah State. So Blake Anderson got things done last year, took them to a bowl game, so did what he needed to do. But I think there's just too many question marks from a talent perspective at quite a few of these position groups, and I'll go over it in a minute. But I don't think this is the same Utah State team that we saw last year, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they adapt, to all the new blood in here this year. So, looking at offense real quick, receiver room's pretty good. Got to give him credit where it's due. Terrell Vaughn is a special guy in that slot, and someone that I think Utah State's going to rely on pretty heavily. I think they got an average quarterback in Cooper Legas, Legas. So you have you have players out there that are going to make an impact for Utah State this year. I think that's very well known. The running back room is the one I have the most questions about. Just due to kind of the lack of experience there. The kid's a true sophomore. This is going to be my breakout player of the year, and that's going to be Robert Briggs. So established himself last year, got some playing time, got some opportunities out there. Picked up 85 yards and a touchdown against UConn. That would have been pretty early in the season. I think that may have been a week 0 game last year. But it was a UConn team that definitely didn't disappoint. Definitely rose above expectations. From a passing game perspective, contributed against Weber State with a 15-yard catch. Again, Weber State FCS, not a huge deal, but shows kind of snippets of what he could be. So, if that comes together, and it's a spread option offense, so I expect Briggs to be a pretty big contributor in an offense that is running back friendly. So, in a situation like that, Briggs is going to come together, have a big year, and really be the guy for the future of Utah State. Only a sophomore, got a few years left after this. And, definitely interested to see how it plays out for Utah State this year. On the defense, this is where I think there's some pretty more they got some pretty substantial questions back here. The D-line is below average. I think outside of Hale, Motu Apuaka. Outside of him, you got a lot of players that haven't proven themselves. You got a lot of guys that are younger or haven't figured it out yet how to get that playing time. So you got one guy in the middle, and then the rest need to rise to the occasion. The linebacker room is actually pretty solid. I think it's a middle of the pack duo there. With Max Alford and MJ Tafisi. So you have a duo right in the middle, and again, it's a 4-2-5. So those linebackers are definitely field generals, and something that Utah State is going to rely on pretty heavily this year. The DB room is the one I have the most questions about, because while you do have one pretty good corner with Michael Anwanyu, really I mean, you can make an argument about the safeties, just to give them some credit. Anthony Switzer and Ike Larson are very serviceable safeties in their own right, but there's just too many question marks in a DB room that ultimately is pretty untested. So with that in mind, I'm going to take someone that I'm going to take the youngest guy in this DB room, the guy that's most likely to try to prove himself, in that cornerback spot, and it's going to be Jordan Drew. So 3-star recruit in the class of 2022. So was able to come in last year, get his bearings, red shirt, but still play a little bit of time. Had a 2-tackle performance against Boise State, and Boise State usually the head of the class in Mountain West. So type of performance that we're going to need to see from him this year. I'm curious how he does in the passing defense. In terms of like, are people going to throw at him? Is he going to be able to defend the type of coverage that Utah State is going to need to win these games? We haven't seen that so far, but again, true, redshirt freshman, so time to showcase it. But I think he's going to have these opportunities. I think he's going to have a chance to make these things happen. And as a result of that, I would hope, or I would expect, that this DB room as a whole ends the year better than how they're probably predicted to end up. So I look at Jordan Drew on defense. I look at Robert Briggs on offense as your breakout players for a Utah State team that I think takes a pretty big step back this year, but we'll see what the future has in store for them. All right, so to recap, Nevada 12th, Colorado State 11th, Hawaii 10th, Utah State 9th. So we're heading in 8th right now. Team last year that, at least in my eyes, they had a pretty good season. Again, kind of similar to Utah State, where it's a team that, definitely performed, but is probably going to take a step back this year. Experienced head coach, which is the one thing they do have going for them. And, that team, in my eyes, is going to be San Jose State. And I know they're predicted to do a lot of good things this year. And on paper, they have a lot of talent on this team. So I think the step back is really just due to the fact that, they have a harder than average schedule. They play a lot of the top teams in the conference, most of them on the road. And, I think the defense is what's going to catch them this year. I think they got a pretty pedestrian defense, pretty middle of the road. But just starting with the offense, this is a pretty dynamic offense, to give them some credit. I think you got the best quarterback in the conference with Shavon Cordero. You have a great running back there in how am I going to say his name? Kerry Robinson. The receiver room is good in its own right. You have Dominic Mazzotti at tight end. You got another option out there with Justin Lockhart. So a lot of talent on this offense. I think San Jose State is not going to have a problem scoring. I promise you that much. The breakout player I'm going to take is going to come from that receiver room. Just the least experienced guy out there, and that's going to be Nick Nash. So very limited playing time over the course of his college career so far. Picked up a TD last year against Eastern Michigan, which is a nice little get. I believe that would have been their bowl game. So got some late season reps, which are good for that development. But really curious to see what he does in a full-time role this year, what he contributes. We definitely want to get those reps up, definitely want to get those receiving yards up, everything along those lines. So I look at someone like Nash as someone who can rise to that occasion. He is a senior, so this is it. We got to make this happen if it's him. So for this year in particular, I expect him a bigger year just by virtue of there are so many options on this offense that defense are going to have to worry about. He may get overlooked, and seeing Nash in those big play opportunities will tell how he ends up contributing to this offense. Looking at the defense real quick, again, I said it was kind of pedestrian. There's not one group on here that I look at and think, they're a top 5 group in the conference. I don't think you have anyone that's bad to the point where I think they're a liability. I think they're just going to be very average, any way you slice it. That's the same with the DB room. You do have talent there, guys like Trey Jenkins and Chase Williams. So there are players back there. The linebacker room is similar. Byron Parham, Jordan Cobbs. It's a 3-4 defense. So kind of naturally the groups that play a little bit more offline they've showed out just by virtue of I'm sure that's how defenses have attacked them. The D line I think is going to be a little questionable. Not even that, just like probably the same deal, same average. I'm trying to find who your big guy is there. Who's your number one guy? It's probably Solane Toia, but again, outside of him, you got to figure out who that next guy up is. And my breakout player for San Jose State's defense is going to come from that D line, and it's going to be Noah Lavulo. So, picked up a sack against Western Michigan last year, and 3 tackles against Eastern Michigan. Now, if he was playing in the MAC, that's a pretty good, stat sheet. But again, all out of conference, but all G5 out of conference. So no harm, no foul. That's roughly the type of caliber opponent that San Jose State plays on a weekly basis in Mountain West. So I look at Lavulo as having an opportunity or having a chance this year to rise to the occasion. He is one of the seniors on this team. This is his last ride. So, I'm sure he wants to go out with a bang, and I'm sure he wants to make a difference and an impact. So, really looking forward to watching this defense play as a whole. I think, every group is decent in their own right, and I think Lavulo ends up being that guy to raise this defense to the standard that San Jose State needs to overcome some of these obstacles that they're facing. So I look at Lavulo on defense, Nash on offense as your breakout players for a San Jose State team that I personally think is going to take a step back this year. But, if it ends up working out for them, it's going to be on the backs of their type of play. So, all right, so to recap, Nevada in 12th, Colorado State in 11th, Hawaii 10th, Utah State 9th, San Jose State 8th. So finishing off the bottom half here, a team that, again, these kind of middle-of-the-road average programs for Mountain West are going to end up, somewhere in the middle, like they do every year. This is a team that last year, I think, was pretty solid in their own right, not spectacular, but kind of good enough for program standards. I think they do take a step back this year. They're not quite as prolific as they were last year, and that's going to be Wyoming. So Wyoming is kind of the opposite of San Jose State this year in the sense that they have a very good defense, but the offense has some question marks. I don't think Wyoming is that much of a step back. I think they're going to hover around bowl eligibility, which is what they were at last year. They were 7-6 last year. They'll play in that ballpark. I think Wyoming and these next 3 teams, at least in my eyes, are pretty interchangeable. So if they do take a step up, it's going to be due to just if they do end up higher, it's reasonable to take that into consideration. If we look at the offense real quick, really good receiver room. I do like Trayton Welch at the tight end spot, but outside of him, I have some questions. I think the room as a whole is probably a top 5 room, and it's really on the back of how good of a tight end Trayton Welch is. But definitely want to see some growth from these other receivers, especially with how many of them are graduating this year. So, looking to see if they can put it together and have a good year. I think looking at quarterback, Andrew Peasley is probably a little bit below average when it comes to this. When it comes to him as a quarterback, it is a QB it's a QB heavy and a QB favorite offense. Pro style West Coast, so definitely something that Peasley could thrive in. The running back room is the one I got the most questions about. It's definitely the one with the least experienced. And with that in mind, the player I'm going to take is going to come from that running back room. And I got to give love to fullbacks if I see that they're on here. So with that in mind, I'm going to call out Caleb Driscoll as the breakout player for this Wyoming offense. So really interested to see how they use a fullback. Not too many teams out there still using one, but I'm sure they're going to use him in kind of like a hybrid tight end O-line type position in short yardage situations. If they're on the goal line, anything along those lines. Just really interested to see how Driscoll gets used by this offense and how it all comes together for him. So, interesting to see it come together for Wyoming. And, again, like it's hard to evaluate fullbacks just, again, due to the lack of use and the pretty consistent turnover. But, I look forward to seeing Driscoll contribute to this running game as well as other areas of the Wyoming offense as a whole. Moving on to the defense, I think this defense is pretty stacked any way you slice it. I think you got the best D-line in the conference, led by Cole Godbout. And again, like it's hard to narrow it down from, Devon Harris is there, Jordan, how am I going to do this one? Bertagnoli is going to be my official guess on that pronunciation. So there are stars on this D-line. There are stars in the linebacker room. Easton Gibbs is one of the best linebackers in the conference. Shea, let's do this. Suanoa, is enough. Like it's a 1-2 punch, and it's a 4-3 defense out there. But those two in particular are ones that rise to the occasion, pretty consistently. I think the DB room is top 5. So my breakout player will come from this room, but really on the backs of their safety play with Isaac White and Wyatt Eckler. So I think it's going to be real hard to score on Wyoming this year. But your breakout player is going to come from that DB room, and it's going to be Daron Harrell. So did get some pretty good playing time last year, and it's hard on this defense because everyone's gotten a lot of playing time. Picked up an interception against Colorado State, pass defended against Colorado State and San Jose State, so been there to defend the pass. Definitely creates creates an identity for himself in this DB room. Makes it hard for quarterbacks and receivers to advance the ball, and that's what Wyoming's going to need. I think they're going to have to do a lot to win more than 6 games this year. Again, probably around that mark is the goal for Wyoming. But if we're looking at above and beyond, and maybe hitting 8-9 or a conference championship appearance, it's going to have to come from this defense. I think they are the keepers of the team, so to say, and Daron Harrell is going to be one of those leaders. I think he's probably the least experienced guy out here from a stat line point of view, which is all the reason he needs to be motivated for this upcoming season. So really looking forward to seeing how he pans out of Hawaii this year in his last year, or Wyoming in his last year. So I'm looking at Harrell on defense, Driscoll on offense for a Wyoming team that ends up, right around that bowl eligibility mark, kind of where they usually end up just about every single year. All right, so I think we're in the top half now. So just to recap, Nevada 12th, Colorado State 11th, Hawaii 10th, Utah State 9th, San Jose State 8th, Wyoming in 7th. So we are down to our top 6 here. This is a team that had a pretty pedestrian year last year. New head coach, and someone that I expect to not overwhelmingly succeed in year one, but create the building blocks for what the future is going to look like, and that's going to be UNLV. So Barry Odom comes in ready to run things in Vegas. I don't think Barry Odom is a particularly bad head coach. Maybe it just didn't work out at Mizzou, but I think he can do some good things at UNLV if given the chance. And I think he's going to start off this year with a bang. So just looking at the offense real quick, I think you got a real good receiver room, and I think you got a real good running back room. It's the receiver room is led by a pretty talented guy, Ricky White. But really looking for that depth, outside of it. I think it still ends up being a top 5 for a receiver room in the conference. Same with the running back. Vincent Davis is a top 5 back in this conference. So, fortunately, with a pro spread, Odom is going to have his ducks in a row kind of automatically. And we'll get to the defense in a second, but it's pretty similar in that sense. But, good looking receiver room, good looking running back. So the breakout is going to have to come from the QB room. So I think it's going to be a big year for Doug Brumfield. So that's your quarterback there at UNLV. I look at his performance against Idaho State, and I know it's an FCS school, so is what it is. But 356 yards and 4 touchdowns is still 356 yards and 4 touchdowns. I would rather he do it against San Jose State versus Idaho State, but that's the building blocks. These things happen. From a running perspective, had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against North Texas. So dual threat guy, guy who can beat you in the air, beat you on the ground, and again has eligibility left after this year. This is the piece that UNLV needs to build their offense up and be the guy for this team and for this campus. So I'm looking at Brumfield to have a big year, to rise to the occasion, to use the guys around him, use this talented receiver room, this talented running back room, and have it come together for this team. The defense, it's kind of the same deal where you have pieces of this defense that are very talented, top 5 in the conference. The D-line is one of them. I like Darius Johnson at the nose tackle. Definitely a talented guy in his own right. The DB room is top 5, probably even lower when you really break it down. Great safety play from Jonathan Baldwin and Jordan Morgan. Nickelback is deadly there. Jere Williams. And again, looking at this DB room, they're all coming back next year. So this DB room is going to be even better next year. So UNLV might be a tough team in this conference when it comes down to it. It's not going to come to fruition this year, but Odom could build something pretty special when it's all said and done. But the linebacker room is the one I got the most questions about. I do think Fred Tompkins is, he's a solid contributor in his own right, and definitely one that I think is good enough to lead that linebacker room. But the player I'm going to think is going to break out for this UNLV defense is going to be someone that followed Odom from his time at Arkansas, where he was coordinator last year. Now he's at UNLV, and he brought a player with him. That's going to be Jackson Woodard. So comes in from Arkansas. Really only substantial play came in their bowl game against Kansas. Again, the most exciting Liberty Bowl in bowl history. I mean, that game was electric from start to finish, and Woodard contributed in that with a pass defended. So he was up there against Jalen Daniels. That's the type of player he was playing against in that opportunity. He doesn't have to play 8 Jalen Danielses or to use more of an SEC example. He's not playing 8 Bryce Joneses. Or Bryce Young's. I'm losing my mind tonight. 8 Bryce Youngs or 8 Stetson Bennett's or 8 Jalen Daniels. He's not going to face that at UNLV. So to be more of a leader on this team and to have Power 5 potential as a linebacker and to come into UNLV and be a difference maker is huge. So I look at Woodard to have a big year. He followed his coach here. He's bought in and he's ready to make a difference. So I look at Woodard on defense, Brumfield at offense for a UNLV team that, while should be good enough this year, could also be building something special for the future. So, all right, heading into our top 5. So Nevada in 12th, Colorado State 11th, Hawaii 10th. Utah State 9th, San Jose State 8th, Hawaii 7th, UNLV 6th. Heading into 5th, so again another team that hovered around that 500 mark last year. I expect more of the same this year. Decent team with a decent head coach. Definitely not worried about long term, and we'll kind of see how they contribute or build upon last year's results. And this is going to be San Diego State. So I got San Diego State in what, fifth place here? Yes. Okay. Good looking wide receiver room as well. Really off the back of Raphael Williams, one of the best, if not the best receiver room in the conference. Very talented quarterback in his own right. Definitely middle of the pack in Jalen Maiden. So someone who can make a difference this year. And I mean, this is it for him. So he wants to go out strong. And even the running back room, I don't think it's that problematic. It's very middle of the road for this team. But my breakout player for this offense will come from that running back room. And it's going to be, again, if you put a fullback on this roster, I'm gonna talk about him. So, player I'm going to pick is Nick Gardenera. So he's going to be fullback for San Diego State this year, redshirt freshman. So a guy with a lot of time left. So very big potential for San Diego State long term. I want to see how he contributes to the run and pass blocking. I want to see how he contributes in short yardage situations. I want to see how he contributes as a pass catcher, kind of like a tight end hybrid, which again is the direction that the position is going in. But again, I don't think Hoke would run an offense with Gardenera out there if he didn't believe in him. So he may be the youngest guy out there. He may be in a position that's rarely used, but Hoke has a plan for him. So I'm looking at Gardner to have a big year for San Diego State and be one of these contributors as they move the running game in the direction they're looking for. The defense, real quick, linebacker room is top 5. Good-looking linebacker room, really led by Cody Moon, who comes in and, again, one of the best linebackers in the conference when you slice it. DB room's a little bit below average. I think if San Diego State does lose games, it's going to be due to their defense more than anything. But DB room below average, but very top-heavy talent. Cedarius Barfield, Devon Celestine, Dejan Malone. You got talent back there. When we throw in a cornerback there, let's throw in Noah Avenger. So, there's definitely talent in these positions, in these safeties, in these cornerbacks. So I'm not worried that much about San Diego State. And San Diego State gets a test in week 0. They bring Ohio to their house, right? So we'll kind of see who's the top dog in either of those conferences, knowing that San Diego State is a good program in their own right. Ohio is a good program in their own right. So interesting to see kind of what the direction of either one will be in about we're under the 4-week mark now. So the D-line is the one I've got the most questions about because outside of Garrett Fountain, there's really no one there that has contributed yet, or at least anything substantial. And it's tough to pick one, but I got to pick someone from this D-line, and it's going to be Darian Dalton. Can't really find a whole lot of information on this kid. This happens with the group of 5 sometimes, where they're starting someone and you don't know a thing about them, and that's going to be the case with Dalton this year. It's going to be trial by fire. He's going to have to step up by virtue of San Diego State is going to need that D-line to lock down, especially against the teams in their conference, especially the teams that got out of conference. It's going to be a big test for this D-line, and knowing that Dalton is a sophomore, he doesn't have that experience yet. He's going to have to get it eventually, and it's going to be this year. So I expect him to answer the call. I expect him to be one of those starters. And again, like, to give credit to Hoke, I don't think he would start players that aren't ready for that light. That spotlight. So I look at Dalton to have that big year for San Diego State defense that needs that D-line to come together. And I look at Dalton and Gardenera as your defensive and offensive breakout players for a San Diego State team that is going to look to capitalize on the success that they had last year. I think they end up probably around that same mark It's hard to get really good in this conference, and yeah, I look at San Diego State to kind of make that happen. So moving on to our top four here. So Nevada in 12th, Colorado State in 11th, Hawaii 10th, Utah State 9th, San Jose State 8th, Wyoming in 7th, UNLV 6th, San Diego State 5th. So this comes into fourth place. Now, if you're watching this, this is probably the team that you may be thinking to yourself, did he just not say it yet? Like, did I miss it in like 10th place? Because this is a team that does not end up at the top of the conference too often. I believe in the media poll for the Mountain West this year, I believe this team was listed to finish in last. And I got faith in them. I got faith it's gonna come together and happen, and that's gonna be New Mexico. I'm putting New Mexico in fourth. This is my bold prediction. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I think it does come together for Danny Gonzalez in year 4. I think they take a pretty substantial leap into bowl eligibility and maybe beyond. So definitely looking forward to see how it comes together for them. I think it's going to be on the play of their quarterback. Dylan Hopkins is one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. Andrew Henry is a top 5 running back in this conference. They're going to win these games by pure firepower. The defense is atrocious. Let's call it what it is. This defense is not good, but the offense is slinging. Or maybe not slinging because that implies a high pass game. But with a spread option, they're going to move the ball around everywhere, running it, passing it, whatever they got to do to get it done. The receiver room is the one I've got the most questions about, because outside of Jeremiah Hickson, who's left? It's a lot of guys with 0, 0, 0 on the stat line. So with that in mind, I got to pick one of them, and I'm taking one of the JUCO transfers, and this is going to be DJ Washington as New Mexico's breakout player on offense. So comes in, this is his last year of eligibility. This is this is all he's got. Has to give it his all. And I trust Danny Gonzalez to make the decision to put him out there. He's the one that recruits these guys. He's the one that identifies the talent. And if he thinks Washington is good enough to go from JUCO to starting at New Mexico, I have no reason to doubt him. It's not my team. So I look at Washington to have a big year, again, by virtue of they've got a great quarterback passing to them, and there's so many unknowns on this offense that one of them is going to have to break out. I'm picking Washington, knowing that he comes in with the most experience, regardless of what level it's at, and is going to make a name for himself before graduating in the spring. So I'm taking Washington as the breakout player for a New Mexico offense that should be pretty fun to watch. Defense, on the other hand, may make you cry. Every position group they got out there is bottom 5 in the conference, probably closer to bottom 3. It's tough to find one to really lean on it. They do have a couple of pieces here and there. In the DB room, Tavian Combs and then Dante Martin. So a couple of guys that can put it together, a safety and a cornerback, which is those are those building blocks. In the linebacker room, it's Ciare Williams and Ray Lutele. So it's that's a nice little punch they've got there, and it's a 3-3-5. So you got talent kind of all over the back 8 there, but this front 3 is where I've got a lot of questions. I don't know who your top guy is, but they're gonna have to find out quick. The player I think it's going to be is on that D-line. It'll be Gabriel Lopez. So comes in from Wazoo, 3-star recruit in the class of 2020. Never really found his footing up there in Pullman. But he's looking to find his footing at New Mexico. He's looking to make a difference for this team and really be a beast up front. So I look at it as how many 3-stars does New Mexico get consistently? It's probably not a lot. Ultimately, a lot of our the top programs in the country are built at its core on developing 3-star talent. It's the hardest thing to do. It's easy for a 5-star to live up to 5-star talent if they got the work ethic and the coaching. It's a lot easier it's a lot harder to convert a 3-star into a consistent starter who gets drafted or whatever. And I look at Lopez to step up to the plate in that way. So looking at Lopez to have a big year, again, by virtue of someone on this D-line is going to have a big year. Someone's going to have to make those stops. Someone's going to have to apply pressure. And I think Lopez is going to be the guy to get it done. So I look at Lopez on defense. I look at Washington on offense as your breakout players for a New Mexico's team that I think is going to shock the world this year. Hold me to it. Laugh at me if I'm wrong. But I'm high on New Mexico this year. So that takes us to our top 3. So before I get to that, let's just recap. Nevada 12th, Colorado State 11th, Hawaii 10th, Utah State 9th, San Jose State 8th, Wyoming 7th, UNLV 6th, San Diego State 5th, and New Mexico in 4th. So that brings us to our final 3. And by telling you who I think is going to come in 3rd, I tell you who the conference championship game is going to be. So reminder that our final 3 teams, in this preview are Air Force, Boise State, and Fresno State. So again, teams that historically have had quite a bit of success, last year and the last few years as a whole. But the team that I've got coming in 3rd, and I mean, transparently speaking, I could see any of these 3, like any 2 of these 3 in the conference championship. It would not, if you told me this team ends up, in their conference championship game, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But the team I'm going to pick is Air Force. So it's going to be a conference championship of Boise State versus Fresno State. So let's just talk about Air Force real quick before we get to those 2. But, we know the deal with the service academies. We know how they get it done. It's ground and pound. Not as much at Air Force. It's not Navy or Army where you're running triple option. You got 4 running backs out there, a QB that weighs 160 pounds and runs like the Dickens. It's not like that. Not quite as much at Air Force. It's still pretty run heavy, don't get me wrong, but not to that degree. And I think that's what separates Air Force from the other service academies. Just a consistently good run game. With guys like John Lee Eldridge. But outside of that, I can't tell you a whole lot about the receiver room. I can maybe Dane Kinnaman, again, like a guy who's contributed. But outside of that, their quarterback, to my understanding, has never thrown a pass. So, the guy they got starting this year, I don't remember who it was. I believe it was Brad Roberts last year. So this year, new guy, new team, new QB. And that's going to be the guy that has a good year, and that'll be Jensen Jones. So, again, never thrown a pass, but he has contributed as a rusher. Picked up a 15-yard run against Northern Iowa. Again, FCS school, got to do what you got to do. Probably cleanup time. 28 yards and a TD against New Mexico. That's the type of opponent you want to see. That performance against. But as your starter and as your number 1 guy for this team, he's going to have to step up. He's going to have a big year. And, I think the offense is going to be designed around him. Again, this is not a program that uses the transfer portal. It's a very different opportunity there than it is at other programs. So these are all guys that are locked in. Bought into this program, bought into the philosophy that Coach Calhoun brings to Air Force, and I think Jones ends up becoming that guy for Air Force this year as they try to make it back to a conference championship game. Didn't make it last year, but definitely wanted to go back, go to one this year. The defense I think ends up being a little bit better than the offense. The D-line's actually pretty good, middle of the pack. Peyton Zdroik is going to be my guess on how to get that one out. But, solid guy in the middle, and it's a 3-4 defense, so you can only do so much, especially as a D lineman. Linebacker room, I guess, is a little bit below average in my eyes. You do have, Alec Mock as, as one of those linebackers that I think ends up, being a pretty, strong contributor. You got Camby Goff in kind of that hybrid role. They call it a spur, but that's your nickel. That's your nickel back, whatever you want to call them. Every team's got their own name for it. DB room is, I think, good in their own right, mainly due to the safety play. Jaden Goodwin and Trey Taylor are a pretty dynamic 1-2 punch for Air Force. But I think the breakout player on defense is going to come from that DB room, and it's going to come in the form of Corey Collins. So very limited playing time so far over the course of his career. Picked up 2 tackles against Northern Iowa, again, an FCS school. But we want to see that type of performance across the board this year, especially as a senior, especially as a starter. So I look for Collins to have that type of breakout year to showcase that, having him on the bench all these years was the wrong move, and he's ready to make a name for himself, for Air Force. So, generally speaking, it's a little harder to get information on, service academy guys just due to what's made available. But I from what we've seen from Collins so far in that little, sample size that we've got, he's going to have the opportunity to break out. He's going to have the opportunity to have a big year, and it'll be Collins on defense. It'll be Jones on offense for an Air Force team that, again, is going to be pretty good this year. Any way that you take it, they were a 10-win team last year. They could very easily go back to that. So that leaves this conference championship games now. So I'll start with Boise State. We'll do it alphabetically, B before F. Great looking offense. Obviously Andy Avalos has done very well for himself. Out there at Boise. Great looking offense though. Receiver room is very balanced. Stephon Cobbs, Latrell Capels. Throw in Billy Bowens. I mean, this is a good-looking receiver room. I think you got probably the best running back in the conference with George Halani. So talent upon talent, and they have a good test in Week 1 against Washington. Are they going to be able to go out to Seattle and shock the world? This is going to be a fun team to watch this year. But the breakout player, if it's not going to be the receiver room and it's not going to be the running back, it's going to have to be the QB. And that's going to be Taylon Green. So just looking at what he's done last year, 220 yards and 4 touchdowns against Colorado State. 220 is pretty solid, but a 4-touchdown game against a conference opponent is nice. And then did it on the ground, 119 yards and 2 TDs against North Texas. So ultimately, it's a guy that can beat you any type of way. And knowing that he's only a sophomore as well, Boise's going to keep firing. I don't see them slowing down anytime soon. They're building something real special out there. And, any way that you look at it, this Boise offense in particular is going to be special. There's no other way around it. I think Green is due for a big year just by virtue of everything around him coming together. And, that's how it's going to work this year. I think this is going to be a very talented team that, Boise State fans are going to remember for a while. And the defense, I think, is a little bit of a step down. Fortunately, you have a good front six. They're running, a 4-2-5. So your 2 front groups are pretty impressive. Top 5 in the conference. At least in my eyes, that D-line, when you're led by Dimitri Washington in particular, throw in Herbert Gums if you want, but talented dudes out there, guys who can get into the backfield, get pressure. Some of them can play back and get those swats that you need. So I'm not worried about how they're going to get pressure up front. The linebacker room is dynamic. DJ Schramm is one of the best linebackers in the conference. The DB room is the one I got the most questions about, but it's more so they're pretty average. Find a position and you got a player that's made an impact so far. You look at Rodney Robinson. You look at Kaunohi Kanaho. You look at Alexander Tobner. You look at Sei Oladipo. I mean, talent on talent on talent on talent. It's more so a depth issue. And the player I think is going to break out is going to be someone that, honestly, probably speaking, like has had good times in the past, and had it all worked out for him last year, I'd be a lot higher on this DB room. But the player I'm going to pick is Markel Reed. So if we look at last year, and I don't report on anything that happened in 2021 or before, but the kid was slated to have a big year. Got injured in week 1, out for the season, never able to find that groove. But if he comes back with a vengeance, and he comes back, if he comes back hot and he comes back ready to play, Reed is going to have a huge year. This DB room is going to have a huge year. Boise State as a whole is going to have a huge year, and it's on the backs of a few people. It's kind of the unknowns in a sense. So, I look at Reed to bounce back from his injury, recover well, be one of those 2 lockdown corners that Boise State is going to need. And he's going to have, again, a test in week 1. You're going to go up a guy that finished, top 10 in Heisman voting last year, in Michael Penix. Reed's going to have to defend that, and then everyone else on the schedule. So, great test to get himself warmed up for the rest of the year. Great opportunity to see in-game action, and again, interesting to see how this defense comes together with the offense basically being able to score at will. So I look at Reed on defense, Green on offense as your breakout players for a Boise State team that is going to find themselves right back where they expect to be. So now let's take it to Fresno. So Fresno is kind of the opposite of Boise State. They have a phenomenal defense, probably the best one in the conference, and they have an offense that has some question marks. We'll call them that. Starting off with the offense, you have Mikey Keene coming in from UCF. I think he automatically ends up as a top 5 quarterback in the conference. Don't sleep on this kid. He's going to light it up at Fresno this year. I think your running back room is solid with Malik Sherrod. I have him, in the middle of the pack. The receiver room is the one I think is a little bit of a step down for, because outside of Eric Brooks, I don't know who your dude is. I don't know who that guy that Fresno's going to rely on is. But the player I think is going to establish himself for the future. I don't think I've done a tight end so far, so this would be nice to kind of finish up this last team with one, and that's going to be Trey Watson. So, sparing playing time so far. 17-yard catch against San Jose State is a nice little pickup. Picked up 4 catches against UConn for 39 yards, and I think that one was, I know I said Utah State may have been a week 0. It may have been Fresno State. One of the two of them. It was either week 1 or week 0, maybe a bowl game. I don't know. But again, want to see him more involved in the passing game. Want to see him used in the red zone. Want to see him used as an option for this offense that is going to play the ball. Going to play around with the who they give the ball to. Is it going to be the receivers? Are they going to hand it off? I trust Mikey Keene. I trust Jeff Tedford. Came in last year and had a dynamic year. I expect Tedford to be that leader going into year 2, and that the expectations will rise. The offense may struggle a bit this year, but I think the pieces are in place for them to get it together. And Watson is going to be a reason for that. He's due for a big year, and he's going to be one of the reasons why Fresno State ends up in a conference championship. Now, this defense is dynamic. This defense is top 5 in every single category I could find. Mainly, how I'm measuring returning production. DB room and linebacker room are probably closer to top 3. Looking at the DB room, I mean, Dean Clark is one of the best safeties in the conference. Maurice Norris is a good-looking nickel back. Cam Lockridge at corner is a lockdown guy, the type of guy you need back there. And then the linebacker room is a dynamic 1-2 punch. Malachi Langley and Lavelle Bailey, they know exactly what they got to do. One plays a little bit more up, one plays a little bit more back. They get it done. And, again, this defense is going to be scary. So, and the D-line, I think, is scary in its own right, too. Devo Bridges at the end is not one to mess around. Johnny Hudson is not one to mess around in the middle. But I think your breakout player is going to come from that D-line. It's going to be one of the younger guys that hasn't had that chance yet, and it's going to be Gavriel Lightfoot. So, really only stat line numbers that have popped for me so far were a sack against Cal Poly, which I think that maybe that was week 1. I don't know. It was a year ago. Give me a little bit of slack here. But, FCS school, not a huge deal. But again, it was, it's the type of experience that you got to need, especially as a true freshman. Had 2 tackle performances against Boise State. So, your conference matchup, your conference championship matchup both last year and this year. And a 2 tackle performance against USC. And, again, I know USC beat the brakes off of everyone, but those are the types of teams you want to see him show out against, especially as a young kid. So I look to Lightfoot to be an established starter this year, to go through the whole Mountain West schedule, not with ease, but with comfort now. He got his freshman year under his belt. He's ready for more, and he's ready to make an impact for Fresno State as they shoot for the moon again this year. So I look at Lightfoot on defense. I look at Watson on offense as your breakout players for a Fresno State team that ends up as one of the best group of 5 teams in the country. All right, so now let's pick a conference championship winner. It's Boise State and Fresno State, a rematch from last year. Are we getting a back-to-back, or are we getting a changing of the guard? Is it going to be a prolific offense or a dynamic defense that takes it home for their team? And the team that I think is going to win Mountain West this year is Fresno State. And you know what they say, defense wins championships. That's what they've been saying. I think Fresno State's defense shows up, and they are not playing around. They want that hardware. They want to get it done, and it's going to happen for them this year. They're gonna. This could end up being one of the better Fresno State teams in school history when it's all said and done. So if you're out there in California, you got a lot to look forward to this year. So, all right. So that concludes this episode of the New Year's 6 podcast. Tune in next week as I go through the Sun Belt, same type of format. Last official conference, I'll do something a little different for the independents because there's only 4 of them. But thanks for your time. Thanks for tuning in, and looking forward to an excellent start of the season soon.